I'm Tan the Tam BOTC channel, and today let's talk about another movie. These are more so just me talking about my time with the movie and my overall experience and thoughts on them in a way that is more personal, I guess, than an actual review. And I wanted to talk about the Neverending Story. I've talked about it before. I thought it would be an interesting one to talk about today. I also doing different backdrops for each video, uh, and wearing like different random clothing and such, random hats and masks especially. But for this one, also my camera for some reason wouldn't zoom in the proper way or zoom out the proper way, so I don't know what's going on with that. So I have it a little further back, so if you like see me lean forward or something, that's why. But nonetheless, this is a movie that's made it to like my top 10 favorite movies. I originally thought of this movie as just a typical fantasy movie, a really darn fun 80s fantasy movie, but kind of, like along the lines of the other ones we've seen back in the day. Like, could it go up against the Dark Crystal or the Labyrinth or Willow, stuff like that? And with nowadays like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and stuff. Well, actually, early 2000s, I should say. But rewatching this and thinking about the dialogue and the characters and the overall why it's called the Neverending Story, it's somewhat more brilliant than it used to. While I do think any problems have to do with like this green screening, especially when flying on Falcor and stuff, there's just not many problems I can think of. I guess people also find them the kid, Sebastian, I believe his name is, a bit annoying, but he goes through a story arc technically the same as both the viewers and Atreyu, but in a different sort of way. But when you see those fourth wall breaking points, they really messed with me. And seeing this in theaters in that one part where the princess like looks directly at the audience is just the one of the craziest parts. And when you realize lines like they were watching him while he was in the bookstore, his story, and as he reads your stories, they're also have sharing stories with him or whatever the quote was again. Uh, and that's what led me to think about like the never-ending story. It's not just a joke about, oh, if it ends, then why is it over? Why is it just an hour or so long? Why does it have an ending? Why does it only have three movies? God, I don't want to get to those other two. But yeah, it's more about the concept of uh, we're experience the story of what we're watching on screen, each and every person that watches this, and then we're experiencing Sebastian's story, and then he's experiencing a Treyu story. It's kind of like a Inception, never-ending story between us. Each person individual that watches the movie has a story. And then when I think of like places like Hollywood, like you got Hollywood and the gaming industry with these stupid companies like EA and stuff, and then you got the AI slop and the fact that they're trying to replace jobs and stuff for artists and such. I just think of that one Gnork quote that applies to a lot of that, where Fantasia is the world of human fantasy, and it is basically limitless. But like Atreyu asks, like why is Fantasia dying then? Because people are beginning to lose their hopes and dreams. They're not be they're not as creative as they used to be, and we see that with like remakes and remasters and stuff, overwhelming, or sequels to older game franchises and stuff. There's only so few things that, even like the few things that are really big, like Resident Evil 9 and Baldur's Gate 3, are still technically sequels to older series, just done in a different perspective and way, kind of. But yeah, we're still getting a lot of that stuff, and it feels like in a lot of places, especially with like AI stuff, that creativity is slowly dying, and whoever has the control has the power, as Gnork says. Just a line that weirdly feels relevant from like a goofy 80s fantasy movie of all things. And there's a lot of great quotes. I love they look like big, good, strong hands. I love the rock biter. I love the practical effects and the puppetry. I'm surprised that Jim Henson didn't work on this because it feels kind of like his territory, but it's incredible to see the work, and we don't really see as many movies do the kind of work something like this does. It's kind of like when we moved on to over relying on CGI, or look at like going from 2D animation to the 3D animation we have today. Like I love Toy Story, and that's kind of what started the big boom. And Toy Story 2 is like one of my favorite, other than The Incredibles. There are still some really good 3D animation, but I do really miss that 2D animation style, and the hard work and effort that went into that stuff. And this is a similar deal with just the animatronics of like Falcor and such. And yeah, I love this cast. Not everybody is, once again, Sebastian's a little annoying. Probably not always the greatest actor, but he does a fine enough job. He works with uh, what he's given. And it's just a really kick ass kind of 80s film that both is very like in like it's crazy with just like the fourth wall breaking stuff really gets to you, acknowledging what the actual title means as well, the never ending story, kind of the inception of each of us living that story as well. And because of like the thought process, as well as even some of the cool theories you can find, I think some of them go a little out there for me, but there's some cool theories on the Neverending story, and I love the world building, the designs, just an incredible fantasy world. Of course, there's a lot of Easter eggs too, especially George Lucas related ones with like Star Wars characters and such. But it is a absolutely great fantasy series, and of course that song, that's really catchy. The never ending story. Okay, I'm not singing that. Uh, but this is such a good movie. It's hard to rate because I have a personal bias to it in a way. Once again, I used to think this was just a typical shocky kind of 80s fantasy, but I've grown to really like this, and it's actually up there in my top favorites, with even movies like The Dark Knight and Lord of the Rings and Empire Strikes Back, No Country for Old Men, and Shutter Island, which are some of my favorite movies, and it's in that top 10 movies now for me because of like how big it is for me. And there are other movies I technically kind of watch more than this, but something about this has just really grown and attached to me. And I didn't have I loved it, of course, but I didn't nearly have the personal bias that I do now. So it's really hard to rate this movie. So I used to give multiple ratings to indicate like, nowadays I do mostly one rating, but I feel like for this movie I have to do like at least two different ratings. What I personally, my personal rating for it, and I think what realistically a rating for this would be. Um, since the problems are mostly really only the only problems are Sebastian. I think the pacing, cinematography, and everything else works really well too. So I don't know. It's a very creative movie. I can guess some people might see certain parts as kind of corny, but besides that, and the green screen Falcor scenes, as well as just Sebastian not always being a character everybody's gonna love at times. It's not much negative things I can say about it. I don't know, like it's hard. It's really hard to rate this movie. I think on a personal level, I'm gonna give this movie probably a solid 9. I'm gonna give it a solid 9. I never really give anything a 10. It's hard to find anything as perfect. But yeah, this is a solid 9 for me personally. I think realistically, I would give it a 8.3 maybe out of 10. So, yeah, it's just an incredible movie that I love talking about whenever I get the chance and checking out like theory videos on. So, yeah, uh, I don't know what else to say. Definitely check this movie out. Think about what I said here with it, and then with it be like you watch it, you then have your own story. You're a story added to the never-ending story. You could say that technically, uh, your life as a whole, the story of your life as a whole, is now connected to this story. It's an interconnected web or family tree of stories that honestly never ends, and you can be added to it. But yeah, this is a fun movie. This is a creative movie, an awesome movie, and weirdly brilliant for its time. That's about it. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, like, share, and subscribe. Let me know what you think of this movie and what your favorite fantasy movie is. Personally, even though I love this movie, I still love Lord of the Rings over it. I always go. I think nowadays, if I put a Lord of the Rings movie on my list, it's kind of like when I do Mass Effect Legendary Edition, by the way. I'm cheating, but I can't separate all three Mass Effect games from one another. I gotta have all three of them. It's the same with Lord of the Rings for me, but if I have to choose, I always love the beginning and the ending of a fantasy adventure. And Fellowship gave me the beginning, while Return of the King gave me a kick ass ending. And I would love to talk about those sometime. But nonetheless, you have an awesome day. Bye bye. That's about it. Bye, Jimmy's mom. I just reversed it.